Welcome to the Who What Wear podcast, your direct line to the designers, stylists, beauty experts, editors, and tastemakers who are shaping the ever-evolving world of fashion.
Hi, Anna. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kat. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to be back.
Well, we're talking about something fun today, which is the 2024 edition of your really thoughtful story that went live a couple days ago called The State of Style. And for anyone who's not familiar, let's give them a little download about what this story is about.
For anyone who's not familiar, The State of Style is a story that I do towards the end of each year. And it's essentially our version of a State of the Union, where I zoom out and look at why certain things are trending over others and why they're bubbling up again at this exact moment in time. So it's easy to think of fashion trends as just articles of clothing that, we choose to wear. But I think a lot of people know that the reality is that trends are something that our team of fashion editors doesn't just get together to invent. There are so many factors that affect what's in style, from politics and economics all the way to pop culture. So this piece will really aim to bring some context into why we're wearing and shopping for the things that we are, and why certain items, brands, and aesthetics this year are happening over others and what it all means.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like for a few years now, we've had so many micro trends, right? And little things bubble. And what I love about this story is it really zooms out for on the bigger picture shifts that are happening. Basically, if you want to be somebody who's you don't try every single little trend and you're not going to spend money on every single little thing, but you want a download of the big shifts that are happening in fashion, I think this is your story so that you can make sure your wardrobe, remains relevant over time.
Totally.
So you obviously follow trends closely on a daily basis, but I'm curious how you went about sort of narrowing in on the macro trends and the big fashion shifts of 2024 to focus on. What resources did you tap?
Yeah. If you're an avid reader of Who What Wear, I think you already know that trend reporting is something that we do quite a lot of. And obviously, sometimes it can feel like everything is trending at once. I will admit that can be a very dizzying feeling. My intention with this piece was really to kind of take a step further back from our day-to-day getting dressed and look at the bigger picture of larger trends and sort of why they're happening now. So with that in mind, I tapped a few experts here, several experts actually in the data space, which is really fascinating. So the first one is Data But Make It Fashion, which many of you have probably heard of because it is such an incredible Instagram account that is just dedicated to providing data about fashion trends, but via this very fun, digestible meme format. She has become such a viral leader in the space over the past year or so. The founder, Made, has a background in computer science, but is also a fashion girl through and through. So it makes her page especially relatable. And she pulled some great data for us for this piece. I also chatted with the team behind List. Obviously, they are a massive shopping platform, so they have, tons of data and insights to share, and they're such an amazing resource. In particular, though, I love what they do each quarter where they put out something called the List Index, which is essentially a very thorough report that goes through, the top 20 brands and the top 10 items of the past 3 months. And they really aggregate that based on things like searches, clicks, and order volume. It's just such a special deep dive into what's actually happening on the back end of things, because I know we talk a lot about what we're predicting and seeing. So it's nice to have that data back it up in terms of what's actually resonating in the wild.
Right, because we can, as fashion editors, we are experts in the space, but a lot of trends can sort of feel like a feeling or a vibe, but that we caught on. So I love that you have the data piece of this to really back it up and show what real people are actually buying and shopping and what they're interested in. It's cool to balance that perspective with our editor sort of spidey sense of what's happening. So I know in a lot of conversations recently, it seems like people are excited about the direction that fashion is going in as a whole, sort of where, we've spent our time in the minimalism, quiet luxury world for quite a bit. And I feel like there's room for a little more personality, a little more experimentation and personal style coming through. And I'm curious if that was reflected in your findings.
So you're very spot on. I think one of the main sort of overall style shifts that we're noticing is the move towards individualism. And it's sort of as a response to this era that we were in over the past few years of hyper minimalism and really stark looks that leaned on neutrality and logoless designs and really sort of like discreet dressing. I think we're seeing this wave of individualism play out in a number of ways, but there's one major trend that has completely defined the year, I think, and that is bag charms, which we've seen across the board. Coach has been a major player in that. A lot of the fashion girls today are taking inspiration from the way that Jane Birkin herself used to wear her own Birkin. She used to, use all of these accessories, and she sort of would use the bag as a canvas for her own self-expression. These bag charms are really a fun and honestly quick way to express yourself and individualize your look and really be able to make it your own without having to buy an entire new wardrobe, without having to invest in a expensive handbag. You can really do it with anything in your closet. And so I think that is one of the most prominent ways that we're seeing this theme of individualism play out this year.
Right. Because you can really use these charms almost like as a little identity marker, right? Like if you could have one from your hometown or maybe your favorite, sort of snack or whatever it is. There's a million ways. And I know our editors have been all over it with the bag charms.
There's so many cute options. It's funny too, because I've seen some girls on TikTok actually going to their local Home Depots and buying carabiners and rock climbing ropes and DIYing their own. So not only is it a way to express who you are and your personal identity, but it's also a fun, crafty sort of activity that you can do without even having to go and buy an actual charm.
Do you remember those? I don't know if this is your era, but like those like lizards that were made out of beads.
Yes.
That you would make like in camp or something.
Oh my God, you're going to laugh because my house keys have one of those lizards on them. I bought it on a trip to Mexico a few years ago and I thought it was like ugly cool. And so I bought it to be a little bit ironic, but I love it. It's like my little talisman.
I'm curious if there are any other accessory moments happening that are sort of intersecting with this wave of individualism.
I've been noticing the way that people are styling their sneakers in particular, which is sort of a fun item we haven't seen a lot of personalization in a while. And some folks are like replacing the laces with either different colored laces or multicolored or thing from fabrics that aren't necessarily even lace, like a piece of ribbon or what have you, even adding charms to the laces themselves. Like there's all these fun ways that sneakers are being personalized and like used as a canvas for DIY projects. That's a very fun one. And then I think it would be remiss not to mention the wave of these ironic LL Bean Boat totes. I know this was a trend that happened really, it really exploded last year and in years prior, but I think it's something that absolutely goes hand in hand with this idea of customization and really just like showing your identity, your personality through what you're wearing. So obviously, everyone getting their embroidery done, whether it be like their initials or some buzzy internet phrase of the moment. I think that's a very fun way to go about it as well.
Absolutely. I saw Tippy is coming out too with a collaboration with LL Bean, a tote that has like a belt around it, kind of a Prada reminiscent belt around it. So, we're still in the LL Bean cool tote era for sure. I saw a funny TikTok of some girls going to like the outlet and where they have ones that were like orders that were never picked up or fulfilled or whatever, and choosing among all of the like pre-embroidered stuff, which was kind of funny.
Gosh,
and all
that
of
is funny.
Yeah, like just picking somebody else's phrase and adopting it for your own was funny. Are there any other accessory trends we should hit on?
Yes, there's another section in this story that I want to touch on, and it's something I'm calling little luxuries. And it's essentially the emergence of this whole category in the luxury space that we're noticing. And it's made up of all of these smaller ticket items. So pillbox hats and these very classic, elegant hats, even swim caps like we saw on the runways, these beautiful sculptural ponytail cuffs that brands like Lee Studio and Lillet are producing right now. I would even add a lot of the statement belts and 80s inspired earrings that are happening. I think this category as a whole can really come down to a way for people to invest in either a luxury brand that they see as aspirational, or sort of a way that they can purchase something in the luxury space without having to make a huge investment, like, a handbag or like a leather coat that can run you thousands of dollars. And it's interesting because there's this economic theory called the lipstick effect. It's a little counterintuitive because we're talking about fashion accessories, but the name is lipstick, but I will explain. So it's essentially this theory that in an economic downturn, consumers spend more on smaller and more affordable luxury items than they do on these larger investment purchases. I'm no economist, but I do think what's happening in the fashion space definitely mirrors that idea. And I think these little items are a fun way to kind of like add some spice to your look and feel like you are buying something that feels a little bit special without having to, make a huge investment purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the idea that like you can kind of take whatever more classic pieces you have in your closet and then like add a little something fresh with these smaller pieces, these accessories, and feel like you're sort of, had your wardrobe refresh for the season without having to buy a lot.
Exactly. I think it's a really accessible way, both from a price point standpoint and also just as an intro into, the world of seasonal trends. It's a very exciting moment.
Yeah. Okay. So quiet luxury out. Is there a new aesthetic that you're seeing fill the gap here?
It's interesting because I'm not sure that quiet luxury is completely out. And what I'm about to say next goes very much hand in hand with it. But I think if last year was defined by the quiet luxury buzzword, then I think we're going to look back and see that 2024 is going to be defined by what we're calling the old money aesthetic. And it's really nuanced. So old money, I would say, is more about signaling this entire lifestyle of wealth rather than just owning a one-off luxury buy. Like when I think of the term quiet luxury, I think of the Rose Margot bag, which is just so famous in its own right without having to have a logo or very obvious design element. It's sort of, if you know, you know. But on the flip side, this old money aesthetic is a bit more obvious without being too flashy. It's a bit like things that signal a broader lifestyle rather than just a single item, if that makes sense. So wearing a pair of riding boots that might signal that you grew up, horseback riding, or a very popular item this summer and fall, but the boat shoe. Miu Miu did a boat shoe. I think we're seeing the rise in classic brands like Sperry coming back. And okay, you're wearing a boat shoe. Maybe that is something that signals you own a boat or you're on a boat often. It's this idea of dressing as if you're part of this upper echelon of society, if that makes sense.
It's almost like you have a lot of leisure time. Like you're not a working person, so you like engage in sport and things that a lady of leisure might do. So I think that's where you get these like hobby type items, whether it's I ride with these equestrian boots, or I go on a boat, or I play tennis, and I wear this hat, and we're still obsessed with status symbols. They just are kind of morphing.
Exactly, which is why I don't think one is out and the other's in. I think it really is just sort of this evolution of like what the items are and how we're defining them as a whole. But I did want to call out that GQ wrote this great piece on why Gen Z specifically is obsessing over this idea of old money. And so I think it's something that is sort of bubbling up to the surface yet again in terms of pop culture, where you have, even more references to Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and JFK Jr.'s style. There's a biopic that was just announced to be produced, which is really exciting, about their life. And no doubt that will have a huge impact on style when it comes out. But I think other reference points would be, Saltburn and the whole aesthetic of that film, as well as Succession there's no doubt how huge of an impact that show has had on style.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think of Succession kind of as quiet luxury-ish, I guess. I don't know, thinking of Shiv's wardrobe. Okay, tell me more. What other aesthetics are happening?
Yes, kind of piggybacking off of that, there is a new aesthetic that we were noticing based on what went on the spring 2025 runways. And it's a trend we're calling the modern bourgeoisie. And it sort of goes hand in hand with this, but the trend is really all about these ornate, lavish, and really opulent clothing items and really putting them together in this way that is just so visually appealing. And it really is the antithesis of this idea of minimalism that we've seen. Some of the designers who are at the forefront of this are Valentino under the new creative direction of Alessandro Michele, which is very exciting. Dries Van Noten did this, as well as Saint Laurent proposed a number of looks that had this really opulent sort of energy. For us, it's being done in a very 80s coded way where you have really strong shouldered jackets and these, ruffled skirts and sort of an explosion of prints and colors really all combined. And so in terms of looking at what's going on in the background outside of fashion and why this might be happening, one theory could be that, in the 80s, there was a very noteworthy recession and then inflation that really defined the early 80s. And so if we're talking about 80s fashion and really that era of excess and more is more, I think you could probably draw a through line to today with, the inflation that's happening and sort of what is going on in the background of our day-to-day lives. Again, I am no economist, but I think it's easy to see that those two things are being mirrored right now. And I think that that's really fascinating. So I myself am more of a minimalist dresser, I would say. But as the year progresses and as we move into next year, I think we're about to see a huge wave of these like bright colors and patterns and really louder ways of dressing. So this is your fair warning.
I'm excited about that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it feels fresh. It does feel like it's being done in an exciting way. Although I will say, as someone who dressing for like a going out wardrobe in the mid 2010s, and it was all about these statement necklaces and platform heels, it does feel a bit like, oh, are we going back there already?
I know, it's crazy to think that the parallels you're seeing between now and the 80s, like that was 40 years ago, which is something that math I can't quite wrap my head around.
Wild. Nuts. I know.
Okay, so I feel like we have a good download on some of the big picture aesthetics. What about narrowing down to those like hot ticket items or styles that people are gravitating towards to signify the wealth or the status that you mentioned before?
I think this comes with no surprise, but barn coats are a huge part of this idea of signaling wealth and status and are a trend that is absolutely defining, fall style right now. So according to List, actually, searches for barn coats have been up a whopping 225% this quarter, which is nuts for a jacket that we really haven't seen in pop culture in a really long time. In particular, they called out the Totem Country jacket as being one of their top 10 products for the quarter. So this is really something that we're seeing at the luxury level and also at the affordable level. So it's really infiltrated the market and it's all over the place.
Yeah, I feel like it's been called out as like the jacket of the season for sure. Like there's not really any question. And the more affordable brands have been all over that. And it's always interesting. I feel like it does kind of tie into what we were talking about with the lifestyle bit of it. It's like a barn jacket is like, you maybe have some land that you're romping around in your barn coat, or at least like a country house or something. I don't know, something that kind of fits into that like lifestyle leisure piece of it, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it is happening because it's a cute piece, but at the same time, it really represents this lifestyle. I mean, it's a traditionally English jacket, right? So it kind of represents like owning some land, living on an estate, maybe having even a farm.
Right. And even I think compared to America, the class structure, in the UK and is also in British culture is also definitely, something that's more prominent, I'd say, than we have here in the US. So that ties back in.
Yeah, that definitely plays a role.
Okay, what about other brands?
Loro Piana is a huge one. And although that certainly falls within the category of quiet luxury, I think what we're seeing now falls in line with this as well, where, it's a brand that Gen Z is now becoming hyper aware of, in no small part because of the TikToker, the Stad guy, who I think has some hilarious videos, but also because there's some key items that are emerging from the brand that we're just kind of seeing like on the mainstream level. So I'll give you a couple examples. The Rebecca flats, which are a really beautiful, like elongated pointed toe flat that are beloved by Elsa Hosk and Jasmine Tookis. And we're also seeing, lots and lots of iterations on those in the affordable market. And then I would also add on to that the L19 bag, which is a vanity case style pochette that's definitely having its viral moment online, which is, a bit ironic because it's a pretty discreet bag in its silhouette, but it's something that, if you have it, you know what it is. If you see it on the street, you know exactly what it is. So I think Loro Piana is a huge one. And then I would definitely also add Ralph Lauren to this list, who represents everything Americana, equestrian, even in terms of sports. They had a huge impact in the tennis world this year, with activations at Wimbledon and even at the Olympics. And so List in their index actually reported 151% spike in engagement with the brand this quarter. And I think even beyond that, their massive runway show that they hosted out in the Hamptons that you went to, Kat, is really it just exemplifies everything that the Ralph Lauren brand stands for and what it represents. So I think owning even just a piece of that is really an entry point.
Yeah. And I feel like for a while there, sort of like pony embroidered or equestrian embroidered bow like hats and things have been popular. They come in a million colors. I'm also curious what designers are leading the way for the more maximalist era that you say is coming.
So in terms of what we're seeing on the runways for spring 25, I think there's a few key leaders in this space. So first I would call out Saint Laurent, because almost half of that entire runway was dedicated to looks that had a lot of these like brocade jackets and ruffled satin skirts and like these really beautiful like high neck lace tops that were layered underneath the jackets. And they were done in this beautiful, beautiful color range of like gemstone hues. So I think given how popular Saint Laurent is in the celebrity world, there's so many names that we're constantly reporting on. Saint Laurent girls like Zoe Kravitz, Laura Harrier, Bella Hadid. I just think it's only a matter of time until we see one of them in one of these more maximalist looks. And I'm very excited to see who it will be first and how they'll wear it.
Yeah, I feel like Saint Laurent does the 80s well. Like if you think about brands that kind of signify that era, to me, it definitely comes to mind.
Absolutely. And all the parallels that we're drawing between the 80s and today, I think it's like even more relevant. And then I would also add a couple more designers onto that. So Loewe, who's always known for doing these really like dramatic, playful silhouettes, but this season leaned into these sculptural jackets and this really like opulent mother of pearl fabrication that was sort of iridescent. I think those fabrics and tones will really kind of lead the way in terms of how people are going to embrace this maximalist vibe next year and next season. And then, of course, Dries Van Noten, who's always known for their prints and their colors, I think for years have been really a leader in that space. But so it's kind of cool to see them again set the stage for maximalism. And this season, that sort of played out through these tapestry printed jackets and really embellished pencil skirts. It's something that we're calling like a new opulence. And I think that will sort of be the evolution also of this era of elegance that we've been talking about all year, which has really been defined by like refined silhouettes. And I think as we like move into next year, it'll be a lot more vivid and loud.
Yeah. I feel like Dries is like of this list you shared, like also Loewe, but like is like the fashion person's pick. It's like outside of like the industry, you might not have that brand on your radar in a super large way, but I feel like people who are in it are all in.
I know a lot of editors who have amazing personal collections of juries throughout the years. It's definitely a hot ticket one.
We also have to talk about the return of boho.
Yes.
Everywhere we look, there's another celebrity sort of in this full Chloe ruffled confection. I think this movement was surprising to a lot of people because a lot of people think of boho as, part of that like early mid 2000s. It looks a little different this time, but can you break down like how this unfolded and is it real? Like, or is boho here to stay? Or is it, I don't know. It's so centered on Chloe too that it's interesting to kind of pick apart, like, is this part of a wider movement or is this just an excitement and a popularity in a sort of reemergence of Chloe?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think there's no doubt that Chloe is the main driver behind everything boho that we're seeing return. I mean, the new creative director, Shamina Kamali, came in, and I believe her first season was for fall 2024. And it really just created this entire paradigm shift because all of a sudden, she's presenting these beautiful looks with, ruffled chiffon and cool girl clogs. And they're pieces that we really have almost seen as being outdated up until like very recently. So I would say huge amount of credit goes to her and everything that she's been doing at the house. And I think it really originated on that runway, actually, because there's this image of all of the celebrities who are sitting front row. And it was, like Sienna Miller and all of these classic Chloe girls all lined up and they're wearing the same platformed clog shoes. I think it was just an image that really caught on and sort of had its moment on the internet for a few days after the show. And so I think it really all started there. And then, in the months after, we saw it play out on the celebrity front. Daisy Edgar Jones wore a number of the looks for her press tour for the movie Twisters. And then it was Sydney Sweeney who wore a look and Sienna Miller again. And so I think people started to see these looks translated onto the street. And then I think from there, it really just exploded on the market. I mean, all of these more affordable retailers like Mango and Zara doing, these like ruffled chiffon tops and dresses and selling them. Like actually these pieces were selling out at lightning speed, which is super ironic. I will say, I don't think I could have predicted that, but it really just goes to show sort of the impact that, this Chloe girl, so to speak, has had on fashion. I would also call out, Hermes, and they have always had this equestrian aesthetic to them, but in recent seasons have leaned into the clogs as well with really cool iterations. And then, of course, Isabel Marant, who has done this for quite a while as well. All in all, it is happening. It's unlikely, but it is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you mentioned, the celebrity stylist co-signing kind of completes the picture because it's like runway, celebrity style, real life, affordable price points. And then it's like, okay, you've provided all of the context for people to really buy into this and make it a larger sort of wave in fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the sheer amount of celebrity looks that we've seen are what went on to drive this, because it's so hard to translate something from the runway. But I think that street style blitz that really happened, because it really was like a lot of these moments were so back to back, even like, weeks back to back. So that I think is really what sparked it. And, they all looked so good. I think everyone just wanted to embrace that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some like really good momentum there. I agree. And boho style obviously is not new. It has a lot of origins that are full of history and meaning. And I'm curious what you think the return of boho, whether there's any parallels that you see between the current climate and its return.
There's no doubt that the 60s are the era that is most known for boho style. I mean, it's really when it proliferated, when it kind of set the stage for being like tied with what was happening in the world at large, which was obviously this moment of political resistance and this countercultural movement that was happening. It was back then a youth-led movement that obviously was against the war in Vietnam. But I think what's interesting is that, even today we're seeing the origins of similar movements and they're being led by Gen Z. So it really kind of mirrors that, where like it feels like this moment where the youth are being mobilized and they are really taking on activist roles in society. So it really feels like that same type of energy that's happening right now. And so although, like we mentioned, boho was a bit surprising from, a fashion editor perspective, I think when you look at some of these things and these parallels, it really isn't all that surprising. A lot of the reasons why boho style emerged in the 60s then was sort of representative of like this free-spirited, anti-establishment energy. And we actually are seeing that again, maybe not in like the most directly parallel way, but I think it's a very similar energy. It's a similar through line. And so these like codes of boho style of like really flowy silhouettes, really sheer sort of like layered fabrics, long pendant necklaces, the chunkier clog shoes, clog sandals, and all of that, all of those pieces really kind of like come together to create this really nice parallel into what was happening then. So.
Okay, I love you're going deep today, which I adore.
Yes.
It's the beauty of this state of style piece, which is just adding a lot of context to these things that otherwise just seem like they're about fashion. On the other end of the spectrum from everything that is boho with the ruffles and the romance is all of the brat summer that we had, right? We can't talk about 2024 fashion without mentioning that. Huge revival in sort of club attire and embracing sort of messiness, undoneness. And obviously the poster girl of it all is Charli XCX. I'd love to hear your take on why you think this album and aesthetic resonated, and tell us about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like you said, it is the brat summer, if not the brat year. Charli is absolutely at the forefront of everything pop culture right now. And I just absolutely love what she's doing because she's an artist that has been around for quite some time. So she's not necessarily new, but she's defining everything cool in pop culture at the moment. So what does this all mean? I think the idea behind the Brat album is really about what it means to be a club girl, a club person, somebody who goes out on the weekends, maybe even goes to raves, like stays up all night. And it's this idea of just like anti-conservatism, if that makes sense, just in terms of aesthetics and style. And so like a lot of people actually dressed up as Charli XCX for Halloween. So I'm thinking of like, okay, what is her outfit combination that she's most known for? And it's really like a white ribbed tank top, super simple, like the kind you buy on Amazon from Hanes, a tiny like leather mini skirt, and maybe there's like some ripped tights and a pair of heels that are far too impractical for the night that you're about to have, but you're going to wear them anyway. And so I think it's really just this return to like going out. This could be a stretch, but it's been quite a few years since the pandemic, but I think this is like a delayed, post-pandemic moment where we're like, oh, like we're outside, like we're going places.
I feel like we're waiting for that roaring 20s moment that everybody was talking about at the post-pandemic. And, it's still the 20s where it finally arrived. It's also an interesting sort of antidote to what we were mentioning, like the quiet luxury thing. I think another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with that is like the clean girl aesthetic.
Yes,
and like
definitely.
That girl's like has like a 10-step skincare routine, is going to bed at 9 p.m. with her hair and a hair mask. And this brat summer, brat fall, brat year is sort of the completely opposite reaction to that.
Yeah, exactly. It's this idea of like, okay, just embracing messiness. Like, your hair might be a little bit tangled and, you probably didn't sit down to do your makeup for an hour. You probably just smudged some eyeliner on and, called it a day because you're going to go out and probably, mess it all up anyway. I think it's just this idea of like rebellion at the end of the day, right? And really like pushing against all of these structured norms. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying with boho in the 60s and just like kind of a countercultural vibe that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So in last year's State of Style, 2023, you called out shapes and silhouettes that have been dominating the early 2020s: puddle pants, oversized bags, mid and low rise denim, maxi hemlines. Has anything shifted in those areas? Because this is honestly one of my favorite sections of the State of Style, because it's literally like the silhouettes that feel fresher, like wear this one instead of this one. And I'm curious for your take, because I think these also move slower, which I like.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point too, right? Is like, we don't really want to say like, okay, this thing's out, you have to go buy a new version of it like every single season, every single year, right? Like trends move quickly, but I think at the macro level, things really do move like a lot slower. I think traditionally things are said to move at a 20-year cycle, which today, who knows if that is really true anymore, just given social media. But compared to what I reported on last year, I would say that a lot of the shapes and silhouettes are definitely still relevant. I talked about the rise of big slouchy shoulder bags. And, sure enough, this year also saw the rise of a number of it bags like the Coach Brooklyn bag that is, hugely popular, also in part because, Bella Hadid wore it and a lot of these celebrities are behind it. And then also this new Saint Laurent Y bag that has the same slouchy, oversized energy where you just throw all your stuff in for the day and sling it over your shoulder and go. So it's really this like practical bag. It's kind of refreshing to see that also play out because it is so like pragmatic.
Right. Fashion and function. Who would have thought?
I know. We love to see it. So it's nice to see some of those same shapes sticking around. But I will say there's one very noticeable shift that I'm seeing, and that is a little bit away from these puddle pants and baggy jeans and trousers that I reported on last year. Of course, they're definitely still going to be around, but I think looking ahead to what will happen next and what's right ahead of the bend is this movement towards more fitted silhouettes, slim fitting jeans, like the really popular Kate Danielle jeans that are more of like a cigarette style, cigarette trousers. Altuzara and Kate right now are doing some very chic high water trousers that have a bit of a retro feel to them with this same shape. And then ahead towards spring 25, you have designers like Proenza Schouler and Tibi experimenting with legging layering. So that's kind of coming around the bend, whether we like it or not, but it was done in a really chic way, either styled underneath a long midi dress, a long coat, or at Tibi, it was styled underneath a pair of Bermuda shorts. So it's not necessarily just a standalone legging, although it was at Prada. So I guess it's a choose your own adventure there.
I'm seeing this too, the slimmer silhouette on the leg. And I feel like the word skinny jeans is always sort of, haunts everybody and elicits really intense reactions. But for me, at least, I plan to kind of dive into this with like you said, like a skinny pant and or a legging. Especially, I love the layered look that you referenced at Tibi. It was so good. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I'm like, maybe just like a relaxed fit is fine. It doesn't need to be baggy. It doesn't need to be super tight. Like, can we just stick with this and like call it good for a few years?
I mean, hey, I'm with you. I think that's the point too, right? Like these more relaxed fit straight styles are definitely what will be sticking around. If I had to guess, I would say that like the ultra baggy will probably cycle out. But like you said, my take on this is not necessarily through like a really slim jean, but a really slim fitting trouser, something I'm actually very excited to style again. Surprisingly, I have a pair from this brand Lafayette 148 that I absolutely love. And I've influenced a few of the girls on our team to buy them too. They're really nice. So I think that's something that we'll be seeing very soon.
I like it. It's always interesting to me, especially among the New York editors like yourself, like what become the it buys of the team where you guys are all influencing each other.
We really are. It's good and bad.
Occupational hazard, I guess. So to sort of wrap this up, I'm curious if there's anything else we should know about where fashion's headed in 2025, just like the big picture.
Yes. So I think we touched on a few of these already, but I would say if there's any main takeaway from all of this, there are two themes that I think are really going to play out more than any of the others. And these are sort of my two cliff notes that I'll leave you with. So the first one is, like we mentioned, this explosion of personalization. So this really is playing out in anything from bag charms and DIY bag charms, all of these little beaded accessories that are really cute. I would even add on some of these like phone charms that are like the wristlets, as well as some of the DIY sneakers with different laces and even like lace charms added onto them, as well as those LL Bean boat and totes with some of the fun personalized embroidery. So I think we'll really see people lean into self-expression as a way to sort of differentiate themselves from the rest of the pack and really just say who they are and express their personality.
I love that. Okay. And then what's the second?
And then the second one, like we mentioned, is the roots of this maximalism era that I think will come back in a huge way. I think, like we mentioned, this will be defined by an explosion of just like colors and prints, but done in a really 80s coded way. And so you'll see a lot of these like strong shouldered jackets, but done in, you know, a gemstone color and maybe with like a really pretty iridescent print, you know, over top, or maybe it will be done in a ruffled lace top or whatnot. And so I think we'll really see that play out in not just colors, but also sort of like really beautiful fabrications and this like opulent, this just overall sense of opulence. That is coming down the pipeline as well. Opulence, maximalism, and then this idea of personalization and self-expression. So those are my two themes that I will end on.
So basically it's like be yourself and be loud.
Exactly.
Be proud. And
loud and proud.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a fun season, year style shift ahead of us. It feels playful and kind of fashion that's like go for it energy, which I'm excited about. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we haven't had this energy in fashion in a while, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. So there's a lot to kind of hang on to.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for downloading us on the state of style right now. I learned so much. Before we go, actually, I have to know who makes your jacket because I've been looking at it for 30 minutes now.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this. I just ordered it off of eBay, but it is a vintage style from Escada, and it has this like collarless blazer silhouette with these really beautiful like silver button details. I'm wearing it casually with a white tank and jeans right now, but excited to dress it up with like a skirt for holiday party season. And then I actually just ordered one of my dream dresses that I've been eyeing for a long, long time. It's this strapless Kate number with an upside down scoop neckline.
I know that neckline.
Yes, it's a really good one. I actually have it in the top version in a snake print. So excited to get my hands on the LBD version of it. And I know I'll be wearing that for years and years to come.
Amazing. Great purchases. I also feel like Escada is such a good brand to search for vintage 80s stuff. That was such a heyday for them. And eBay is like just a treasure trove of vintage finds.
There's so much on there. Yeah. It's good to know those original 80s brands. There's such a wealth of stock on eBay, and you know, you're going to find like the OG from that era.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wear it well. It looks fabulous from what I can see from your shoulders up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, so much for joining us today. It was a treat to talk as always.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Kat.